A little bit late, but we're back. I think we're streaming on Twitch. Yeah, it looks like we are. Did some interesting things there, but it's back. Okay. My name's Wesley, and I am here talking about video games and books with you for the next 20 minutes or so. Um, the plan for today was to look at another older historical figure in the education world. And I think she certainly moves beyond education as well. This is Jane Addams, um, best known for her connection with Chicago neighborhoods and the Settlement House, a kind of community center known as Hull House. So this is the text of her writing that I was able to find at my local library anyhow. Um, 20 years at Hull House. And it compiles a lot of her writings from various eras and various formats and brings it together with some autobiographical pieces as well to give a kind of shape to it. I think it's a really interesting and a really helpful book in uh, even this late day as we are considering how technology has impacted education. She is right at the beginning of that real watershed in education reform. She has a pretty amazing vantage point onto the transformations that are happening in the 20th century or the turn of the 20th century there, and what it's doing to people, especially immigrants, what it's doing to the city as a neighborhood and beyond. Um, and what it means for community. Um, Now, I think that this is where I would kind of recap where we've been so far. Um, I'm gonna just kind of jump right in today, though. Um, and as you can see, I am also logged into my Steam account because one of my friends is playing something there. Um, how does this connect with video games? I think that is the question that I'm going to be pursuing here. Um, so let's jump right in. This is a helpful note here. Um, Jane Addams, 20 years at Hull House with autobiographical notes. So there it is. It's built right into the subtitle, I suppose. So let's try to get through the forward and preface material. We're going to have to jump further. And I think it's pretty fun that we can stream books just like we stream video games. I appreciate anyone out there taking the time this Monday afternoon to follow along. Probably after a long day of school for you. I know it was a long day for me here. So here we are, 20 years at Hull House. We found where her writing actually starts. Her earliest impressions. So this goes back to some of our William James discussion. On the theory that our genuine impulses may be connected with our childish experiences, that one's bent may be tracked back to that no man's land where character is formless but nevertheless settling into definite lines of future development, I begin this record with some impressions of my childhood. All of these are directly connected with my father, although of course I recall many experiences apart from him. So let's jump a few sentences here. Um, uh, here's here's some of her earliest memories. From a very early period, I recall horrid nights when I tossed about in my bed because I had told a lie. I was held in the grip of a miserable dread of death, a double fear. First, that I myself should die in my sins and go straight to that fiery hell, which was never mentioned at home, but which I had heard all about from other children. And second, that my father, representing the entire adult world, which I had basely deceived, should himself die before I had time to tell him. My only method of obtaining relief was to go downstairs to my father's room and make full confession. Um, so the connection here between a theory about understanding a person by understanding their childhood, and then the very first thing, the core chord of Jane Addams' memories connected with her father, and then the most um, important story to tell from the very beginning is this uh, this incredible feeling of guilt, of dread, of fear, um, and the way in which her uh, fears can be assuaged. So when she has told a lie, she says, um, but of course, lies and fiction are the uh, the very beginning of storytelling, of uh, narrative. If we could tell a completely true story, um, I don't know that it would be uh, possible to have scope for the imagination, right, of the teller. Um, and so when we consider the ways that narrative, whether it's in a book or in a video game, helps to uh, expand our sense of what's possible, um, the question here of truth and lies, of guilt and confession, these are really essential. Um, so I'm thinking of games in which storytelling is paramount. So thinking of role-playing games and visual novels and the ways that those stories often hinge on a a kind of forbidden or impossible event that happens, like that uh, often your protagonist wakes up in the middle of the night. Something strange has happened. In Earthbound, it's the meteorite landing. In other visual novels, I'm thinking of the sort of escape the room style games. You might also look at, I suppose, some of those Ace Attorney games, something like that. Um, you have a crime that's been committed, a mystery to be uncovered. And again, these have to be a bit of a stretch. We set up something in order to unravel it later. Um, Now, in her case, this is a fiction, I suppose you could think of it that way, or at any rate, a belief that has been passed on to her from other children, right? Because hell is not talked about in her house. That makes it even more terrible. Um, all right, so we've got her earliest impressions and this connection uh, with um, with her father. All right. Um, I think we can skip along here. Um, we've got Gandalf the cat visiting, um, helping us out. All right, so here we get to some games. So she is not very kind to herself. This bears mentioning here. Beyond humble, I would say she's actually a little bit cruel to herself. So that much hasn't changed since her childhood. Um, so at the bottom of this page, um, the house at the end of the village in which I was born and which was my home until I moved to Hull House, in my earliest childhood had opposite to it, only across the road and then across a little stretch of greensward, two mills belonging to my father, one flour mill, to which the various grains were brought by the neighboring farmers, and one sawmill, in which the logs of the native timber were sawed into lumber. The latter offered the great excitement of sitting on a log while it slowly approached the buzzing saw which was cutting it into slabs, and of getting off just in time to escape a sudden and gory death. But the flour mill was much more beloved. It was full of dusky, flowery places which we adored, of empty bins in which we might play house. It had a basement with piles of bran and shorts, which are almost as good as sand to play in. Whenever the miller let us wet the edges of the pile with water brought in his sprinkling pot from the millrace. So there's some really lovely details there, and some really colorful storytelling. Um, so her earliest games, besides tagging along with her father and trying to um, sort of be part of this aura that she's created around him, or that she finds around him. Her earliest memories of play have to do with his mills, the places that he owns, his businesses, and it's incredibly poetically uh, just that later in life she, of course, will come into contact in a slightly antagonistic way with other great industry titans of that Gilded Age, of that turn of the century era. Um, so there's a kind of innocence about this at first, and he's obviously not at that level. He's only got these two mills, but still a business owner, where she, of course, is going to be part of the movement to help the workers. We need to know that, I think, about Jane Addams to really appreciate these early memories. So, what does she play? She she plays at sitting on the logs as they approach the saw, and then getting off at the last moment. Um, that is interacting with the technology of industry in a a terrifyingly playful fashion. This device, this saw that is cutting up the logs and setting them up to be used to build, to sell, is it's like playing chicken with it. Is what she's doing. Um, Apparently, nothing terrible happens, thankfully. And then the other way that she plays is even better. From her account, is playing with the leftover bits of all the flour and using them to play house, to build like sandcastles, um, and the kindness there of the miller. So the, I guess, um, stock character from many stories. There are millers, of course, in Chaucer, in Tolkien, and here, rather than being greedy, uh, the miller is a kind uh, and benevolent figure, at least to this child of his boss. So there we go. We've got the mention then, pretty passing mention of the death of Addams' mother. My mother had died when I was a baby. She just mentions it there. So maybe that helps account for why her father was so central in her early life. Um, so she's growing up, um, very educated, very well educated, um, and um, having some deep conversations, again, sort of revolving around a religious upbringing. Um, there is a period here where she is struggling to kind of transition from a more childish kind of faith to a more profound kind of faith. Um, okay. And then we get the connection to the world events, the movements of this time. This is the late 1800s. Um, so when she was not 12 years old, she came into her father's room one morning to find him sitting beside the fire with a newspaper in his hand, looking very solemn. And upon her eager inquiry what had happened, he told her that Joseph Mazzini was dead. She had never heard Mazzini's name, and after being told, uh, okay, so a connection with a great leader far away in Italy, but nevertheless um, part of a movement that Jane Addams herself will eventually take on. Um, so this is uh, her earliest memory, or one that stands out clearly as connecting her with this world of larger uh, politics, national events. Um, all right. A a feature of her writing that you'll notice pretty quickly, I think. I wish there were more footnotes and things to help with these, but she'll make allusions. She'll just sort of quote things um, and bring in, like here, a bit of poetry. Um, Again, the kind of education that she was fortunate to have, she wears very lightly throughout the writing. And it makes me at least wish, again, that I had a little bit more background with some of these allusions and citations she's making. Um, all right, so this Mazzini's passing connects for her in this next one with the figure of Abraham Lincoln, a giant, even at that stage, shortly after his death. Um, we're going to move along. I think that we can come to um, where is it? Oh boy. So conflict with the workers um, taking place. Of course, Lincoln is far from perfect. Um, okay. Find. Okay. So part of the inspiration then for Hull House, as she pulls out here, um, was the figure of Lincoln. Uh, so she holds him up as the greatest American, um, that he never forgot how the plain people in Sangamon County thought and felt when he itself had moved to town, and this habit was the foundation of his marvelous capacity for growth. Um, so again, connecting for her, at least learning, or at least the pursuit of knowledge, of memory, of empathizing and connecting with experiences uh, is the necessary um, fund of the great resource of the American people, of this democracy that she is trying to build up for the working people. Um, so, all right, running low on time here. I think we can see this as a kind of companion piece to the Frederick Douglass narrative of the life, using at least these first early chapters of Jane Addams, which are the more autobiographical ones, um, to see her. Um, well, what's different, of course, for her being being very privileged, she has access to an incredible education. Um, but what's the same is that she is able to recognize just how valuable that is, just how powerful it is, um, and is able to convey that through her writing. So in that respect, similar enough to Frederick Douglass. And similar too, as we saw, um, although her psychologizing is very limited, she's not developing the theory, but she's going off of a theory of the importance of early childhood memories. Um, one that William James similarly emphasizing, as he does, the importance of feeling, of the inner experience, the inner life of the individual. But of course, with Jane Addams, we have much more of an interest in the collectivity as well, the ways in which people come together to make things happen. Um, as we'll see as we get deeper into this Hull House reading, um, some of the ways that she attempts this. Um, so we get the idea of Hull House um, kind of brought about through these role model figures of hers, her father, Abraham Lincoln, and then through her travel, her experiences abroad and at college. Um, I think we can um, pick up there for next time when we get to the actual, um, as it's called, a settlement house, the kind of nonprofit community center that they create together. And we'll go off of the we'll go off of the early memories of play and connect those into her life's work. Um, Now I appreciate y'all again, those who've tuned in for this very strange use of Twitch. I recognize not a lot of video games this time. We'll try to bring in a little bit more of those visuals for you going into this next chapter as we talk about the power of the community and knowing that life is going to get busy for people here going into this holiday season. I hope that you're finding some time to read, to play video games, and relax and get out while it's still light and still warm wherever you are. It obviously has gotten very dark here. I apologize. My lighting is not the best. Uh, but thanks again for tuning in and enjoy your time with Jane Addams and Hull House. For next time, we'll be digging into some of her later projects. Till then, take care.